case amateur athletes and amateur news every day. If you're a player or coach and would like an interview, DM me for a collaboration. And if you're loving the content, smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Today, we'll talk about the AP poll, and it has not been revealed this week. And today, see the top teams that's coming up in the top 25. Coming at number one is Ohio State with a record of 11-0, and they're led by Julian Sayon, who went 239 over 301 with 2,800 passing yards already, with a completion rate of 70% and 27 touchdowns. And he's led by Jeremiah Smith, who had 69 receptions, 10 yards, 902 yards receiving and averaging over 13 yards per catch. And Bo Jackson, a running back, and his carries are 129 carries, 835 yards, 5 touchdowns, and averaging over 6.5 yards per carry. Coming at number two is Indiana with a record of 11-0, and they're first in the Big Ten. And they're led by Heisman hopeful Fernando Mendoza, who has 2,641 yards passing, 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a QBR of 88.8 and a completion rate of 73 completion percentage. And Roman Hemby is his running back. He has 151 carries, 704 yards, 5 touchdowns, averaging over 4.5 yards per rush. And he has 13 receptions for 153 yards and averaging over 11 yards per catch. Coming at number four is Texas A&M. Coming at number three is Texas A&M with a record of 11-0, and they're first in the SEC, and they're led by Marcel Reed, who went 189 completion over 306 attempts, 2,752 passing yards, a completion rate of 61%, 25 touchdowns, and on the ground he has 77 carries, 395 yards. He's averaging over 5 yards per carry and 6 touchdowns. And he has a dynamic running back, Reuben Owens II, who has 99 carries, 570 yards, 5 touchdowns, and averaging over 5 yards per carry. And he has 9 receptions for 115 yards. And Casey Conception has 52 receptions, over 800 passing yards receiving, 9 touchdowns, and averaging over 15 yards per catch. And he also has 7 carries for 55 yards, averaging over 7 yards per carry. Coming at number four is Georgia with a record of 10-1, and they're second in the SEC. And they're led by Gunnar Stockton, who has 22 completions, over 308 attempts, a completion percentage of 71.4, 2,400 passing yards, 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and he also has 10 carries for 59 yards, averaging over 5.5 yards per carry and 1 touchdown. And he has a great running back, Nate Frazier, who has 129 carries, 701 yards, 5 touchdowns, and averaging over 5.5 yards per carry. He has 9 receptions for 61 yards and averaging over 6 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. And they have a dynamic wide receiver that all defenses need to look out for is Zachariah Branch, who has 63 receptions, 638 yards, 3 touchdowns, and averaging over 10 yards per catch. Coming in number five is Oregon, who has a record of 10-1, and they're ranked third. They're third place in the Big Ten. They went up one spot, and they're led by Dante Moore, who has over 2,400 passing yards, 23 touchdowns, 207 completions, over 284 attempts, a completion rate of 72.9, 3 carries for 49 yards, and he has a dynamic running back. Noah Whittingham has 95 carries for 727 yards, 6 touchdowns, and averaging over 7 yards per carry, plus 15 catches for 70 yards and 1 touchdown. Coming in at number 6 is Ole Miss, and they went down one spot, and they're third place in the SEC, and they're led by Trinidad Chamberlain, who has over 2,600 passing yards, 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, and a QBR of 84.0. And he's led by Keywan Lacey, who has 231 carries, over 1,100 rushing yards, 19 touchdowns, and averaging over 4.9 yards per rush. Coming at number 7 is Texas Tech, and they went down one spot, and they have a record of 10-1, and they're led by Brenton Morton, who has 156 completions, over 235 attempts, and a completion rate of 66.4. He has over 2,100 passing yards, 17 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And he's led on, and Texas Tech is led by Cameron Dickey, who has 168 carries, 944 yards, 13 touchdowns, and averaging over 5 yards per carry, 17 receptions for 179 yards, and averaging over 10.5 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. Coming in number 8 is Oklahoma with a record of 9-2, and they're fifth ranked. They're fifth ranked in the SEC, and they're led by John Mature, who has 198 completions, over 318 attempts, a completion percentage of 62.3, 2,200 passing yards, averaging 7 yards per pass, 10 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. And Xavier Robinson is the dynamic running back on the ground, has 74 carries, 408 yards, 4 touchdowns, and averaging over 5 yards per carry, 14 receptions for 89 yards, and averaging over 6 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. Coming at number 9 is Notre Dame with a record of 9-2, and they're led by C.J. Carr. He has 178 completions, over 266 attempts, a completion percentage of 66.9, 2,500 passing yards, averaging over 9 yards per pass, 22 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And they have a dynamic running back, Jeremiah Love, who has 185 carries, over 1,300 yards rushing, 17 touchdowns, and averaging over 7 yards per rush, 26 receptions for 274 yards, 10 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns. Coming in number 10 is Alabama. Roll Tide has a record of 9-2, and they're led by Ty Simpson, who has 237 completions, over 354 attempts, 66.9 is completion percentage, 2,900 passing yards, and averaging over 8 yards per pass, 22 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And Jan Miller has 108 carries, 410 yards, 3 touchdowns, and averaging over 3.8 yards per rush, 16 receptions for 96 yards. Coming in at number 11 is BYU with a record of 10-1, and they're led by Bear Boschmeyer, who has 187 completions, 297 attempts, and a completion percentage of 63%. He has over 2,300 yards passing, averaging over 7 yards per pass, 13 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And he also has 11 carries for 64 yards, averaging 5.8 yards per rush, 1 touchdown. And L.J. Martin is a beast in the running game. He has 195 carries, over 1,100 yards rushing, 8 touchdowns, and averaging over 5 yards per rush. Coming at number 12 is Vanderbilt with a record of 9-2, and they're fifth in the SEC. Behind Diego de Pavare has 224 completions, over 312 attempts, a completion rate of 71%, 2,900 passing yards, and averaging over 9 yards per pass, 26 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and has 17 carries for 86 yards, 5 yards a carry, and 2 touchdowns. And a solid tight end Vanderbilt has is Eli Stowers, who has 57 receptions for 705 yards, 4 touchdowns, and averaging over 12 yards per catch. Coming at number 13 is the U, Miami, with a record of 9-2, and they're fifth place in the SEC, and they went up one spot, and they're led by Carson Beck, who has 240 completions, over 323 attempts, 74.3 completion rate, 2,800 passing yards, 8 yards per pass, 22 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And Mark Fletcher is their running back. On the ground, he has 131 carries, 655 yards, 9 touchdowns, and 5 yards a carry. And on the receiving side, he has 14 receptions, 107 yards, and averaging over 7 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. Coming in number 14 is Utah with a record of 9-2, and they went down one spot. And they're third place in the Big 12 behind Devon Dampier, who has 178 completions, 278 attempts, a completion percentage of 64%, 1,900 passing yards, averaging 6 yards per pass, 19 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. And Utah has a solid running game also behind Wayshawn Parker, who has 121 carries, 836 yards rushing, averaging over 6.9 yards per carry, 6 touchdowns. And he also is a solid wide receiver. He has 9 receptions for 100 yards, averaging over 11 yards per catch and 3 touchdowns. Coming at number 15 is Michigan with a record of 9-2, and they went up 3 spots, and they're third place in the Big Ten behind freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood, who has 2,100 yards passing yards, 9 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. He has 171 completions, over 275 attempts, a completion percentage of 62.5, and a QBR of 74.6. And Michigan running back who's doing the thing on the ground has 143 carries, 871 yards, 10 touchdowns, and averaging over 6 yards per carry, and has 8 receptions for 82 yards, averaging over 10 yards per catch. Coming in at number 16 is Texas with a record of 8-3, and they went up one spot, and they're fifth place in the SEC behind Arch Manning, who has 213 completions, over 341 attempts. His completion percentage is 62.5, has 2,700 passing yards, and his average per pass is 8 yards. He has 23 touchdowns and 7 interceptions and a QBR of 67.2. And Ryan Wingo has 46 receptions for 736 yards, 6 touchdowns, and averaging 16 yards per catch. Coming in at number 17 is Virginia with a record of 9-2, and they're first in the SEC. They went up 2 spots, and they're led by Chandler Morris, who has 215 completions, over 323 attempts. His completion percentage is 66.6%. He has over 2,400 passing yards, averaging 7 yards per pass, 14 touchdowns, and 7 interceptions. And Jamari Taylor has 187 carries for 917 yards, 13 touchdowns, and averaging over 4.9 yards per rush. And he also has 35 catches for 185 yards and averaging over 5 yards per catch. Coming at number 18 is Tennessee with a record of 8-3, and they're in 8th place in the SEC. They went up 2 spots, and they're led by Joey Aguilar, who has 229 completions, over 342 attempts, a completion percentage of 67%, and he has thrown over 3,000 passing yards and is averaging over 9 yards per pass, 23 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and a QBR of 77.8. In Tennessee, running back is Deshaun Bishop, who has 143 carries, 886 yards, 12 touchdowns, and averaging over 6 yards per carry, and also has 11 receptions for 121 yards. Coming at number 19 is USC, and their record is 8-3, and they're in 5th place in the Big Ten. They went down 3 spots, and they're led by Jaden Mavave, who has 226 completions, 344 attempts, a completion percentage of 65.7, has over 3,000 yards passing, and averaging over 9 yards per pass, 21 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. And it's led by Makai Lemon, who has 78 receptions for over 1,100 yards, averaging over 14 yards per catch, 10 touchdowns, and also has 8 carries for 2 yards and 2 touchdowns. Coming in at number 20 is James Madison with a record of 10-1, and they're in 1st place in the Sun Belt Conference and went up 1 spot. And they're led by Alonzo Barnett III, who has 168 completions, over 276 attempts, a completion rate of 60.9%, has over 2,200 passing yards and averaging 8 yards per pass. He has 17 touchdowns for 6 interceptions and also has 17 carries for 153 yards and averaging over 9 yards per carry and 4 touchdowns. And Wayne Knight has 151 carries for 966 yards, 8 touchdowns, and averaging over 6 yards per carry. Coming in at number 21 is North Texas with a record of 10-1, and they went up 1 spot, and he went up 1 spot and is placed in 1st in the American Conference. And they're led by Drew Massmaker, who has 251 completions, over 358 attempts, a completion rate of 70%, 3,400 passing yards, averaging over 9 yards per pass, 26 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And they're led by Khalid Hawkins, who has 168 carries, over 1,000 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, and averaging over 6 yards per carry, 26 receptions for 306 yards, averaging over 11 yards per catch, and 3 touchdowns. Coming in at number 2 is Tulane with a record of 9-2, and they went up 2 spots. And they're led by Jeff Resleff, who has 181 completions, over 296 attempts, over 2,400 passing yards, a completion percentage of 61%, 8 yards per pass, 14 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And he also has 99 carries for 565 yards, averaging over 5 yards per carry and 12 touchdowns. And Shaz Preston has 33 receptions for 539 yards, averaging 16 yards per catch and 4 touchdowns. Coming in number 23 is Georgia Tech with a record of 9-2, and they went down 8 spots, and they're fourth in the ACC, and they're led by Haynes King, who has 211 completions over 294 attempts, a completion percentage of 71.8%, and he's averaging over 8 yards per pass, 12 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions. And Eric Rivers has 40 receptions for 536 yards, 1 touchdown, is averaging over 13 yards per catch. Coming in number 24 is Pittsburgh with a record of 8-3, and they're led by Mason Henshaw, has 154 completions, 244 attempts, a completion percentage of 63.1, over 1,800 yards passing, and averaging 7 yards per pass, 14 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. And they have a solid running game. Kenny Johnson has a solid passing game. Kenny Johnson has 47 receptions, 691 yards receiving, averaging over 14 yards per catch and 5 touchdowns. Last but not least is SMU with a record of 8-3, and they're first in the SEC behind Kevin Jennings, who has 255 completions over 386 attempts, and a completion percentage of 66.1, over 3,000 yards passing, averaging 8 yards per pass, 24 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And TJ Harden has 151 carries, 703 yards, 6 touchdowns, averaging 4 yards per carry, and has 16 receptions for 80 yards and 5 yards per catch and 1 touchdown. For all your amateur news and your college football content, subscribe to Formula Park 1 on YouTube. Thank you for your support.